Let me tell you something powerful. A high-value woman never begs for love. Not because she doesn't feel deeply, not because she's cold, but because she knows that begging for love is the quickest way to lose herself. When you truly understand your value, you stop chasing those who don't see it. You stop auditioning for someone's affection. You stop bending over backwards hoping they'll finally notice your worth. Because you already know your worth and you don't need a spotlight to prove it. A high-value woman isn't afraid to walk away. She doesn't stick around in places where her love is treated like an option. She's not interested in trying to make someone ready. She's not here to convince anyone to choose her. She's not afraid of being alone because she understands that loneliness with peace is better than togetherness with chaos. She understands that real love doesn't need to be begged for. It shows up. It's consistent. It's clear. And when it isn't, she doesn't chase it. She lets it go. Now, let's be honest. Begging for love doesn't always look like getting down on your knees. Sometimes it's texting again after being ignored. Sometimes it's waiting for a message that never comes. Sometimes it's changing who you are just to be enough for someone else. A high-value woman doesn't play that game. She doesn't hand out discounts on her self-respect. She knows that someone who truly values her won't make her question her place in their life. She holds her standards high, not to be difficult, but to stay aligned with what she deserves. She's kind, yes. Compassionate, of course. But she's not available for emotional scraps. She doesn't need to be someone's almost, maybe, or backup plan. Here's the truth. Love, at its best, is not something you earn by proving yourself. It's something you recognize when it shows up in its true, healthy form. The kind of love that lifts you, not drains you. That makes you feel seen, not invisible. That holds space for your heart without you needing to beg for it. A high-value woman invests in herself before she invests in anyone else. She doesn't sit around waiting to be chosen. She chooses herself every single day. She builds her life, her peace, her passion, her purpose. And if someone wants to be part of that life, they better come correct. She's not impressed by breadcrumbs. She's not fooled by charm without consistency. She listens to actions, not just words, because she knows energy doesn't lie. When she senses she's not being valued, she steps back, not to punish, but to protect. Because the woman who values herself will not stay where she is not valued. Does she love deeply? Absolutely. But her love isn't up for negotiation. It's given where it's cherished, not where it's tolerated. She doesn't beg. She doesn't chase. She attracts. She lets the right person rise to meet her. And if they don't, she doesn't sink. She rises higher. Because at the end of the day, she's not looking for someone to complete her. She's looking for someone to complement the powerful life she's already building. So if you've ever felt the urge to plead, to prove, to beg for someone to stay, pause, breathe, and remember who you are. You are the storm. You are the peace. You are the prize. And a high-value woman never begs for what she knows she already deserves. A high-value woman understands something most people overlook. that real love cannot be forced, chased, or begged for. She knows that when you start chasing someone who isn't reciprocating your energy, you're not only wasting time, you're leaking self-worth. She doesn't run after love because she's grounded in the quiet confidence of knowing she's worth being pursued. This doesn't come from arrogance. It doesn't come from entitlement. It comes from a deep, unshakable understanding that her value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. She chooses, she doesn't chase. This woman doesn't feel the need to prove her worth to anyone. She's already done that inner work. She's learned that if someone can't recognize her light, it's not her job to shine harder, it's their loss. She doesn't go out trying to convince someone to love her. She doesn't perform, she doesn't audition, she doesn't shape shift to fit someone else's ideal. Instead, she stands still in her truth, and from that stillness, she chooses, carefully, consciously, and intentionally. When someone enters her life, she observes. She doesn't rush. She doesn't get swept away in the fantasy of what could be. She pays attention to what is. She looks for effort, consistency, emotional intelligence. She looks for someone who's capable of meeting her where she is, not someone who expects her to dim her light to make them comfortable. She chooses based on how someone makes her feel. Safe, seen, respected. Not based on potential or charm or the rush of chemistry that fades after the honeymoon phase. A high-value woman has learned, often through painful experiences, that chasing someone only leads to one thing: disconnection from herself. She's felt the emptiness of reaching for someone who pulls away. She's tasted the ache of shrinking herself to be liked. She's lived through the self-doubt that creeps in when she waits for breadcrumbs instead of holding out for the full meal. And she made a decision: never again. She refuses to be in spaces where she feels like a guest in someone else's life. She knows she deserves to be wanted, not tolerated, chosen, not settled for. So she doesn't spend her days obsessing over how to keep someone interested. Instead, she spends her energy becoming someone she is proud of. She invests in her growth, her health, her peace. She builds a life so fulfilling that love is a bonus, not a necessity. And when someone comes along, they're stepping into something solid, something beautiful, something she built on her own. She understands the power of her presence. She doesn't give it away lightly. She's selective with her time, her energy, and her heart. Not because she's closed off, but because she knows what it cost her to heal. She's not interested in starting over with someone who only shows up when it's convenient. She's not here to teach someone how to treat her. She leads with grace, but she walks with standard. This woman chooses herself first. Always. She doesn't abandon her needs just to keep someone around. She knows that if love requires her to betray herself, it's not love, it's sacrifice. And she's done sacrificing. She's done settling. She's done playing small in relationships that don't deserve her depth. She's not afraid to walk away. She's not afraid to say no. She knows that no is a full sentence, and "I'm not available for that" is a form of self-love. She doesn't fear being alone because she enjoys her own company. She's not waiting to be rescued. She is the rescue. She doesn't look for someone to complete her. She's already whole. She's just looking for someone who complements that wholeness. In the past, she might have been the one sending one more message, giving one more chance, holding on just a little longer, but not anymore. She's grown, she's evolved. Now she watches behavior. She listens to energy. If someone isn't making her feel secure, she doesn't beg for reassurance. She steps away. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. She knows that love flows naturally when two people are aligned. It doesn't have to be forced. It doesn't require games or tactics. It just is. She doesn't operate from fear. She knows that the right connection won't need to be chased. It will unfold in its own time with mutual effort and mutual care. So she waits, not passively, but patiently, actively engaged in her life, knowing that when someone worthy arrives, they'll recognize the woman she is. And when that person shows up, she doesn't lose herself in the connection. She stays grounded. She continues choosing herself day after day, because that's what a high-value woman does. She doesn't lose her identity in love. She brings her full self to the table and expects the same in return. She chooses, she doesn't chase, because she knows that anything built on chasing is built on imbalance. She's not trying to win someone over. She's not playing to be liked. She's living to be aligned. And alignment never requires begging. It requires knowing who you are, what you deserve, and refusing to settle for anything less. She is the choosing. She is the standard. She is the peace. And when love arrives, it doesn't feel like running. It feels like home. A high-value woman has learned that boundaries aren't walls to keep love out. They are doors that determine who gets access to her heart. She doesn't beg for love because she understands the power of honoring herself. Her boundaries are not selfish. They are not harsh. They are expressions of her self-respect. When someone fails to treat her with care, attention, or consistency, she doesn't cling tighter. She doesn't plead. She doesn't lower the bar. She steps back, not to punish, but to protect what she's worked so hard to build inside herself. She knows that love without boundaries is not love. It's chaos, it's imbalance, it's self-abandonment disguised as connection. And she's done living like that. She's no longer available for relationships that cost her her peace, that drain her energy, that leave her guessing. She used to think love was about holding on, no matter what. Now she knows love is about holding standards and only letting in those who rise to meet them. There was a time when she would have made excuses for poor behavior. She would have waited on replies, tolerated disrespect, overlooked broken promises. Not because she lacked strength, but because she hadn't yet discovered the power of saying enough. But life taught her, pain taught her, disappointment shaped her into the woman she is now. A woman who doesn't beg. A woman who doesn't bend just to be loved. A woman who leads with compassion but walks with clarity. When someone crosses a line, she doesn't argue endlessly to explain why it hurt. She doesn't exhaust herself trying to get them to understand. She simply enforces the boundary. She shows them, not through anger, but through action, that her love has limits. Not because she's guarded, but because she's grown. Grown to understand that access to her is a privilege, not a right. Her boundaries are quiet. They don't come with drama or threats. They show up in how she responds. She stops engaging when the energy feels off. She removes herself when she senses manipulation. She doesn't beg for closure, she creates it. She doesn't need to scream to be heard. Her silence speaks volumes. It says, I will not be treated this way. I respect myself too much to stay where I'm not valued. She also understands that setting boundaries doesn't make her hard. It makes her healthy. She can be warm and still have limits. She can be kind and still say no. She can love deeply and still protect her heart. That balance is what makes her magnetic. That's what makes her a high-value woman. She's not hard to love. She's just not willing to entertain half love, part-time effort, or one-sided connection. She communicates clearly. She tells people what she needs, and if they ignore it, she adjusts accordingly. She doesn't force someone to be ready. She doesn't beg someone to act right. She knows that someone who is right for her won't need constant reminders on how to treat her. She doesn't try to convince someone to change. She simply watches who they are and makes decisions from there. She trusts her gut. She's learned that when something feels off, it usually is. And rather than rationalize red flags, she pays attention. She listens to her intuition, not her insecurity. She recognizes that someone who truly cares will respect her boundaries, not test them. Love doesn't have to hurt. It doesn't have to confuse. And if it does, she gives herself permission to walk away, no matter how much she wanted it to work. That's the strength most people miss about her. It's not that she doesn't feel, it's that she refuses to betray herself for those feelings. She's willing to let go of what she wants in the moment to protect what she needs in the long run. She's not moved by chemistry alone. She's looking for character, for consistency, for commitment. And she knows that none of that can exist in the absence of boundaries. The people in her life either rise to meet her standards or they remove themselves, and either outcome is fine with her. She's not looking to control anyone. She's looking to connect with someone who respects her. She doesn't have time for confusion. She's not here to teach grown people how to act. She's here to build something real, and real love requires mutual effort, mutual respect, and mutual accountability. This kind of woman doesn't chase anyone down for closure. She knows that closure isn't found in someone else's explanation. It's found in her own decision to move forward. She doesn't stay stuck in cycles that steal her joy. She breaks them. She rebuilds. She remembers who she is. And each time she enforces a boundary, she comes home to herself just a little more. What's powerful is that she doesn't just set boundaries in romance. She sets them in every area of her life: family, friends, work. She guards her peace like it's sacred, because it is. She knows what it took to create that peace, and she's not going to let anyone take it from her without consequence. Even when it's hard, even when her heart wants to give someone another chance, she reminds herself that love without respect is not love at all. And when someone shows her they can't meet her standards, she doesn't beg them to. She lets them go, and she trusts that the right people will never need to be pushed to treat her well. This is the woman who glows differently. The woman whose energy is calm, centered, and powerful. Not because her life is perfect, but because she's no longer willing to live without boundaries. She knows she is worthy of a love that sees her, hears her, and honors her. And she knows that love begins with how she treats herself. She doesn't beg, she doesn't plead. She leads with grace, with strength, with standards. because her boundaries are her love language. And anyone who doesn't speak it doesn't get close. A high-value woman doesn't try to convince anyone to stay. She doesn't try to prove why she deserves love, because she knows that real love is mutual, effortless, and freely given. She doesn't beg, she doesn't plead, she doesn't chase, because she understands the difference between attracting love and forcing it. When someone is truly right for her, they move toward her naturally. She doesn't need to manipulate the outcome. She doesn't need to be anything other than who she already is. Love that's real gravitates toward her, not away. She's done with overextending herself just to hold someone's attention. She no longer lives in the exhausting cycle of doing more, giving more, hoping that this time it will be enough. That was the old version of her. The one who hadn't yet realized that the right person wouldn't need convincing. The right person would recognize her. And not just recognize her, but value her, cherish her, and show up consistently for her without being pushed. She understands now that love is not something you earn by becoming smaller, quieter, or more agreeable. Love is not a trophy handed out to those who sacrifice the most. It's not won through suffering. It's not something you can secure by constantly proving yourself. She no longer thinks love is about performance. She's not auditioning for someone's heart. Her presence alone is the offering. And if someone can't see the value in that, she simply steps back and allows life to do the. There's a certain kind of grace in how she lets go, not because she doesn't care, but because she finally understands that holding on to what doesn't want to be held only creates more pain. She knows that someone who truly wants to be in her life won't leave her confused. They won't send mixed signals. They won't go hot and cold, in and out. They will be clear. They will be intentional. They will be steady. And when someone shows signs of inconsistency, she doesn't jump to try harder. She observes. She listens. And if the pattern continues, she walks away. What makes her powerful is that she doesn't fight to stay in someone's life if they don't fight to keep her in theirs. She doesn't beg for time, energy, or attention. She doesn't stay where she's barely tolerated in the hope that she'll one day be fully loved. That's not how she operates. She understands that energy should be mutual. Effort should be balanced, and love should feel safe, not like a constant struggle to prove she's worthy. She knows that her worth is not up for negotiation. She doesn't lower her standards to fit someone else's limitations. She doesn't cling to potential. She no longer falls in love with who someone could be if only they tried harder. She's learned that it's not her job to teach someone how to love her. It's not her job to mold herself to their emotional availability. If they can't meet her where she stands, she doesn't try to pull them up. She lets them go. This kind of woman doesn't compete. She doesn't feel the need to win someone's attention in a world full of distractions. She knows what she brings to the table, and if someone is too distracted or too uncertain to recognize it, she doesn't waste time trying to change their mind. Her energy is too sacred for that. Her peace, too important. She protects both like they're priceless because they are. She's not heartless. In fact, she loves deeply, passionately, and with a rare kind of loyalty. But that love is reserved now. It's not handed out carelessly. It's given where it's appreciated, reciprocated, and honored. She doesn't open her heart to just anyone. She opens it to someone who proves, not just says, that they're ready for it. And if they're not, she doesn't take it personally. She doesn't internalize rejection as a reflection of her value. She understands that people can only meet her as deeply as they've met themselves. There's a certain stillness in how she attracts love. She's magnetic, but not because she's trying to be. She's magnetic because she's in alignment with her truth, her values, her peace. She knows that when she lives authentically, the right people will naturally be drawn to her. She doesn't need to chase love. It finds her when she's being real, when she's being whole, when she's not chasing. Even when someone walks away, she doesn't collapse. She grieves, she heals, but she doesn't beg. She doesn't try to talk them out of leaving. She lets them go with love and with the understanding that what is meant for her will never require her to betray herself. She doesn't try to rewrite the story. She doesn't hang on hoping they'll come back. She trusts the unfolding. She trusts that if it didn't work, there's something better aligned with her becoming. The beauty of her strength is subtle. It doesn't scream, it speaks in actions, in silence, in the quiet decision to not respond to mixed signals, in the peace that comes from walking away without bitterness, in the knowing that she deserves a love that chooses her with clarity, not confusion. She's not chasing, she's not persuading, she's attracting. By being herself, by honoring herself, by standing tall in her truth. And the kind of love that matches that energy doesn't have to be begged for. It shows up, it stays, it grows. Because it recognizes the power, the softness, and the beauty she carries. She doesn't beg for love. She knows that love that has to be begged for was never love in the first place. It was attachment. It was fear. It was trying to fill a void. But she's filled that void herself now, and in doing so, she's become the kind of woman who doesn't need to plead for love. She is love. And that kind of energy doesn't chase, it calls in what's worthy and lets go of everything else. A high-value woman understands that her self-worth is not tied to someone else's acceptance. She doesn't need a relationship to validate her value. Her confidence doesn't rise and fall with someone's presence or absence in her life. She's built her worth from the inside out. It's not based on what someone says, does, or chooses. It's rooted in her identity, her growth, and the way she honors herself. That's why she doesn't beg for love, because she knows she's already whole. She doesn't look for someone to complete her, she completes herself. And because of that, she doesn't cling when someone starts to pull away. She doesn't spiral into panic thinking she's not enough. She doesn't go into overdrive trying to win someone back. Instead, she centers herself. She reminds herself that she was valuable before they came into her life, and she'll still be valuable if they leave. Her self-esteem doesn't waver in the face of rejection because it was never built on someone else's approval. There's a quiet power in the way she carries herself. She doesn't need to shout about her worth. It's evident in her actions, in her calmness, in her ability to stay grounded even when someone walks away. She doesn't fall apart when someone doesn't choose her. She understands that not being chosen doesn't make her less. It simply means that person wasn't aligned with the version of love she's holding space for. And she would rather wait for aligned love than settle for inconsistent affection. This kind of woman has a relationship with herself that no one can shake. She listens to her own voice before anyone else's. She trusts her own judgment. She keeps promises to herself. That's where her confidence comes from knowing that no matter what happens around her, she will not abandon herself. And because she's so deeply connected to herself, she doesn't allow anyone to define her worth. In the past, she might have looked for reassurance from others. She might have sought validation in how someone responded to her, treated her, or made her feel. But now she knows better. She knows that when her self-worth depends on someone else, she gives them power over her peace. And she's no longer willing to hand over that power. Her peace is non-negotiable. Her worth is non-negotiable. She doesn't base her confidence on how desirable she is to someone. She bases it on who she becomes every day, on how she shows up for herself, on how she faces challenges, how she handles setbacks, and how she continues to grow. Her confidence is built through action, through choosing herself even when it's hard, through walking away from what doesn't serve her, through standing in her truth even if it means standing alone. She's not afraid of being alone because she knows the difference between solitude and loneliness. She finds strength in her own company. She enjoys her space. She uses time alone to reconnect, recharge, and realign with who she is. That's why she's not desperate for attention. That's why she doesn't crumble without someone by her side. This woman doesn't need a relationship to feel beautiful. She doesn't need constant praise to feel seen. She knows her value, whether someone affirms it or not. That doesn't mean she doesn't appreciate love, connection, or intimacy. She does. But she doesn't rely on it to feel worthy. It's a beautiful addition to her life, not the source of her identity. She understands that confidence isn't about arrogance or proving herself to the world. It's about inner security, about knowing she has nothing to prove, nothing to beg for, nothing to chase. She doesn't operate from insecurity. She doesn't need to be someone else to be loved. She doesn't perform. She just is. And that authenticity is what makes her powerful. That authenticity is what sets her apart. Even when she's in a relationship, she doesn't lose herself. She keeps her own life, her own passions, her own voice. She doesn't shrink to fit into someone else's expectations. She doesn't silence herself to avoid conflict. She remains rooted in who she is. And if a relationship ever asks her to trade her worth for connection, she walks away. Because no relationship is worth losing herself over. She isn't afraid to raise her standards. She doesn't see boundaries as barriers. They are expressions of her self-respect. She doesn't fear rejection because she knows that anyone who walks away simply clears space for someone who sees her clearly, who respects her fully, who values her deeply without needing to be convinced. She surrounds herself with people who uplift her, who reflect back her strength, not her insecurities. She's intentional about who she allows into her space because she knows that energy is contagious, and she protects her peace like it's sacred. Because it is. She worked hard to create this sense of self, this deep-rooted confidence, and she won't trade it for fleeting affection. Her life is full, with or without a partner. She's not waiting for someone to bring her joy. She cultivates it daily. Through her work, her passions, her friendships, her growth, she creates a life that excites her, fulfills her, and nourishes her. That way, love is never a desperate need. It's a welcomed addition. She doesn't settle because she doesn't need to. That's why she never begs for love, because begging implies a lack, and she doesn't live from lack. She lives from abundance, from fullness, from the belief that the right person will see her clearly, love her wholly, and show up without needing to be chased. Until then, she continues walking in her worth, grounded in her truth, and confident in her path. And that energy, that's irresistible. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't ask to be loved, she simply is.